Hi there. Well, welcome. It's Lotus Lindley with Art of Sacred Embodiment. And it's been a while since I have recorded anything publicly, so I'm excited to be here and to just share a little bit about what I'm experiencing right now with some of my clients and something that might be helpful for everybody in general. So, as we've been going along this journey of our awakening, our ascension, our descension, our consciousness expansion, whatever it is that we want to call it, um, I'm wanted to focus on the concept of integration and really begin to share more about the deep need for understanding and incorporating integration into our journeys. So, I actually have a blog post that I wrote about this that I will link to this video for more on integration. But what I wanted to share about is maybe some of the more subtleties and the nuances about the actual embodied process of integration, as well as the challenges that might creep up along the way. Years ago, I read the book Care of the Soul by Thomas More. Loved it. This was probably at the end of the 90s. And one of the ways that he talked about integration, or at least the way that I understood it at that time, was about the chewing of the cud, right? The cow that chews the cud over and over, that one mouthful of food. He's chewing it and he's like extracting all of the nutrients and he's in no rush. It takes no, there's no hurry. And he's chewing and chewing and chewing. This then assists, like it does for all of us, the more we can chew our food, break it down, allows that digestion and the assimilation and the extraction of our nutrients to become that much easier to really then be able to receive all of, let's say, the food information, the nutrient information, the chemical information from the foods that then move in and find their proper ways to assist our body. So, our spiritual evolution really includes something very similar to that. And that is what Thomas More talked about, that chewing the cud. The chewing the cud is when we dive deep internally and connect more to soul. When we're out experiencing, when we are having our epiphanies, when we're seeking, that is the external part of the journey, right? That is, we could say, spirit. We're inspired, we're learning new things, we're having epiphanies, we're going through all of these new revelations over and over and over, right? Depending on where we are, particularly in the beginning stages where all of our programming is starting to break down and we're starting to see with new eyes or see with that third eye with more clarity and depth. So that's that external, that's the outward part of this cycle. The integration is the inward part of the cycle. That soul presence, that soul, we could say, is the feminine aspect of our journey, brings us inside and wants us to really chew the cud of what we've been learning so that we can assimilate and integrate everything that we have experienced into an embodied, deepened, wizened, soul presence um, experience where change becomes transformation. the change that can happen quickly on the surface of things where it kind of stays in the mind and in the thought forms. And I talk about this in the blog. But what we're really wanting to do is we're wanting to take that air energy, so to speak, and we want to anchor it down into the earth of our own being. And to do this, if we are not adept yet at learning how to just be, how to come within, how to be within our own stillness, how to gain that deeper intimacy with our soul, with the expressions that happen on the inner landscape as we begin to transform. It's that inner standing, right? Not an understanding, but an inner standing where we take all of that energy, all of those awarenesses, all of those learnings, and we create a sacred space and time to allow the soul to do its magic, to create its alchemy. This is where we take knowledge that's of the intellect and where we become embodied through wisdom. This is where we start out seeking at any phase and stage, wherever we are in our journey. And whatever level of maturity we're at that time, we go to a deeper level of maturing ourselves by connecting to soul, by connecting to our depths, by allowing ourselves to step back from any kind of doing, where we unplug and we untether from all that's been before so that there can be that rebirth process that takes place. So, what are some of the challenges that can really inhibit this process? And, I want to use the word completion lightly. So let's just say, what do we need to do to really anchor whatever new level we're at, whatever higher frequencies of energies of understanding, whatever new emotional um, IQ, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, somatic intelligence that we're grokking after every phase out in the field of learning. So the first challenge that tends to come up is, how skilled are we at being able to just stop, right? To slow way down. Let go of the fear of missing out about what's happening in the external world that we need to be doing. We need to catch up. We need to learn more. We need to know more. Because at some point, right, our cup becomes full and we can't really fit anything else in this amazing vessel and vehicle. It just sort of pours in and right and pours over the sides and the edges, and that doesn't serve us and it doesn't serve anyone else. And we're just skimming the surface of the true depth of who we are in the making of becoming, who we are in the remembrance of what we have forgotten. So we want to be able to recognize that difference first between change and transformation. Transformation is a deep process where whatever happened prior is no longer going to be the reality that we're in. we can maintain many realities, and a similar kind of parallel experience when we change, right? We go from one job maybe to the next job. Some things change. We've got new peers or coworkers. We have a new environment. We might have different schedule, but the rest of our life pretty much stays the same. Transformation is the process where, let's say, we shifted our job, but in the shifting, maybe we moved to another state or another country. Maybe we're moving into a higher level of what we are doing. So there's a deep learning curve, and we're going to come face to face with our strengths and our shortcomings, our fears and our vulnerabilities. There are going to be those ways that we're going to have to overcome and learn new things about ourselves and let go of ways that no longer operate. We're going to, maybe we left on not great terms. Maybe we got fired. Maybe we quit and it wasn't a healthy departure. So we get to reflect on that. And maybe, if we got fired, we've got to do some deep soul searching. Maybe the ego's been bruised, right? So it forces us into this deeper process to integrate what has been into what is becoming. But there's always this void space when we move through transformation. Some people call it the dark night of the soul, depending on how long this goes on. So we need to be able to go within. We need to be able to unplug and untether. And instead of the fear of missing out, we need to access maybe not the joy, but like the joy of missing out, the recognition that we're being given an initiation in a sacred process. And part of that process means that we're going to be in the unknown for a while, and maybe we're going to be rendered unable to continue going and doing and maybe distracting ourselves or scattering our energy outside of us. Sometimes when we don't really know how to stop and integrate, chew the cud, digest and assimilate and rebirth, will be helped by the universe, by getting sick, getting an injury. Something will come and knock the sails out of us so that we don't actually have a choice in surrendering. We're forced to surrender. So we want to know, right, that we actually do have a choice in how we navigate these learning stages and this learning curve of integration. So part also what makes this challenging is many of our nervous systems are dysregulated. We're all hearing more and more about nervous system regulation, more in all walks of life, because we're recognizing how much the nervous system impacts how we operate in the world, how we respond versus react, how we can actually quiet our mind, how we can not be overcome by anxiety or deep depression. Either anxiety or depression, the collapse or the hyperactivation can inhibit our ability to surrender comfortably into a state of openness that allows us to deeply let go and be. So there's a lot of discomfort oftentimes in the letting go of doing, of learning more, of being active in the world. Part of that is because we have a very strong conditioning and programming to be active. There is a deep program that we are here to be productive, that we always need to be doing and being productive in the world. Meaning, I might even perceive that I'm relaxing and I'm taking space and integrating when I'm reading. Now, we got two levels of that, right? Reading um, nonfiction, where my brain is continually being stimulated to learn more information, or there's fiction, where maybe I can sort of go off and that relaxes me a little bit and relaxes the nervous system a little bit. However, we're still taking in stimulation. And what I'm getting at here is non-doing, I don't want to say any stimulation, but learning how to not need stimulation. That means books, podcasts, guided meditations, um, TV, new talks, computers, going out and doing activities. Even if, even when we're going out and we're doing activities like sound baths and group meditations, awesome. Yes, please. However, we're still in the energy field of other people, of other people's energies. We're still stimulated by external forces. There's a reason why ashrams are a sanctuary and call us out of the world. And that's because the masters knew the importance of, of quieting the external stimulation so that we could access the subtle sensory wisdom and awareness that only comes when we are in periods of bubble time. So let's call it, right, like our sacred bubble. So this is challenging. And what I would suggest, right, is taking small baby steps, but taking the steps, learning how to increase the level of solitude and stillness, even if it's by 5 minutes every couple days. Learning how, and this doesn't necessarily mean doing meditation. One of the most healing forms and grounding forms for integration is being out in nature. And when I say being out in nature, hiking is fabulous, yes. If you want to take it further, stop, sit, be. Allow yourself to attune to the subtlety of the bird calls, the sensation of a gentle breeze, the rustling of the trees. This is perfect in your backyard, right? And then letting your awareness tune in to even just the tiniest of activity around you. I remember years ago in like 2000, 2001, when I was going through a deep forced 3 month period of deep integration. When I finally surrendered to it, I went out into the backyard. We had this really great high fence, and I write about it in my book, Awakening from the Dream, a Kundalini, um, a Kundalini journey. I had a high fence, so I went out there in just my underwear, and I laid stretched out on my belly on the grass. And I had already heightened my sensitivity to the subtleties to a beginning degree, and I could feel the softness of the grass and the coolness of the grass on my skin. And as I laid there on my belly, I began to notice the abundance of life in the soil, in the grass, climbing around, all these little beings, so hard at work, right? They were busy in their own subtle reality. And I was mesmerized, and the more I watched them, the more relaxed I got. And the more that I was laying flat on the earth, as I'm sure many of you, understand about earthing and grounding, everything in my body just let go even deeper. And I got to the point to where I no longer felt the pull outward. I wanted to remain inward. I found the zone. I found, we could say, that Zen state. I found that fifth dimensional reality. And we hit that higher state because we're able to come within. So it's learning how to adapt our nervous system, our body, our brain to a level of slowness that takes a while to discharge the latent stimulation in our nervous system and in our brain, in our muscles, all of it, right? So this is an embodiment process. So when we hit that place, we start to then enter into this unknown. When we're really transforming and integrating that deeper transformational um, phase, we'll just say phase, there's a letting go that happens of the ego construct, and we start connecting more deeply to our soul presence. Now, this soul presence begins to open us up into a void space. This void space becomes rather, we'll say, neutral, where there aren't a lot of emotions that are present anymore. There's not a lot of busyness in the brain. There's an emptiness that takes place. And it can be really disconcerting if it is that first or second or even third emptiness, because we start to recognize that we're no longer attached to the external world in the same way. And we feel a little disconnected from the reality as we knew it. And this is where the ego starts to break down. But right when it starts to realize, like, oh my gosh, like, whoa, I don't feel anything. I feel lost. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I can't find A, B, C, or D. Maybe my motivation, what I used to care about. I can't find that I can remember certain things that maybe just happened a week ago. So the ego goes on high alert because the ego construct, one of its many things, is to keep us safe. So the ego sort of has to go through these growing phases with us. I'm not of the school that we oust the ego or need to destroy the ego at all. I take a more holistic and integrated view that we work in tandem. And as our soul continues to expand and remember the truth of who we are, the ego is going to go through minor freakouts. And the more adept we get at holding space for ourselves in this process, the more that we become aware of the habitual habits that lure us back into doing, right? They say, oh my God, I got to do this. Well, I'm just being lazy. I've been sitting around here doing nothing, right? For 3 days, 4 days. I must be depressed. Oh my gosh, I must be depressed. Something's wrong with me. All of these alarms go off because if we're not schooled in integration, we misread all of the signs and we misunderstand that so many things are being stripped away. And what we are invited to do at that point is to stay in the stillness. We allow ourselves to not know. We allow ourselves to witness and observe certain things in our lives falling away. Let's put this in another term. We begin to go through a death process. This can be a mini death. This can be a larger death. So when you're truly transforming, like when you're deeply on that path, you are going to go through deep, disturbing death processes. It is part of waking up and remembering the deeper truths. And it is when these happen that everything that we've been seeking and pulling in, this is when all of that information lands. This is when we get reconfigured. And in that reconfiguration, we sort of go through a bit of a scramble, right? We think we want all of this information. We want the results of all of the practices that we're doing. We think we want, right, to enter in to these expanded states more permanently. But in order to access those literal states of being, we're like a house of cards inside. We're going to go through a dismantling. And if we don't have the maturity of the previous, the previous spiritual IQ tests, that then deepen our awareness and help us remember that everything's okay when everything falls away. It's okay if I haven't left the house for a month when I'm on the path and I have learned what is taking place inside. It's okay if I feel depressed or null and void of many things in my life when I'm on a trajectory and I've been pulling in so much information and new awarenesses and greater epiphanies and downloads, right? If we truly want to access those higher states of being and learn how to hold those levels of reality, we have to learn to integrate them into the inner reality first. And it's challenging. So this is what a lot of us are facing more and more because we're all rapidly popping like popcorn and waking up and learning and seeing. All of that is awesome. But we want to recognize there's a balance. And there is a very real dance that has to happen internally for that alchemy and transformation to take place, so that we literally are reborn into new ways of being, as to new beings that we are birthing. We could say higher levels of ourselves, which are just soul aspects, can then come in because we have opened up to the truths that resonate with that. But we're going to disconnect and we're going to cut the depth of that short. We're going to miss, at least that time around, if we don't understand how and what the signs are to actually give ourselves the sacred cocoon, the womb cave, to rest back into and allow everything that needs to be released to truly release, so that we come back with new space, deeper wisdom, clearer seeing, deeper awareness of compassion and love. And not just because we've had an experience and within 24 hours it's gone. This is a much deeper reality that we're stepping into, to anchor into the body. This is an embodied process of our soul, literal soul recognition and soul presencing, meaning we know ourselves. We're remembering ourselves as a soul expression in tandem with the divine. So everybody has to find their own way and your own rhythm. And when we can begin to allow it to be part of our lifestyle, where we're actually incorporating the small shifts little by little, and learning in in easier times how to unplug and untether from the compelling need to learn, go, do, achieve, receive, take in more. We're learning to discipline the ego construct, to know that it's okay, it's safe. And then when we go through the big dishevelings, that we start to understand, what is it that's happening? How do I navigate this? And if I don't know how to do it on my own, how do I find assistance to be able to give a reflection of the potentials of what's happening here, so that I may really evolve and expand into this new, deeper awareness and rebirthing that's taking place. So I hope that this helps to recognize that integration is part and parcel with waking up and with our spiritual journey. We cannot attain where we are seeking to attain without learning how to integrate this into our life and into our being, and to learn to trust it, to learn to trust something bigger than us, which is what we're going to get introduced to through this process. We learn to trust the divine, God, goddess, divine source, whatever that is for each of us. And we're going to have our ways of how we more deeply integrate. This isn't a one size fits all. I think there are ways that can be a general way that's going to support everybody. But then how do we ascertain for ourselves what those ways truly are? Because the ego can be a little tricky, right? Oh, well, I'm going to hang out today. And then as soon as I feel maybe a little bit more rested, then I'm going to recognize, I'm going to think that I'm ready to go do more. When really, we're just on the cusp of regaining a little bit of energy and emptying out about this much, right? But we think we're empty when really we're not truly empty until the brain, the heart, and the deeper soul can be accessed. So it's fine tuning our own subtle awarenesses inside. We learn this through sensation. We learn this through connecting to our body's deep communication. This is an inner intimacy, a self intimacy relationship that we learn to master, that then allows our path that we're traversing to become, um, more ease and grace. Not perfect, doesn't always feel good, but we learn to sit with that as well and recognize all things pass. Everything is moving through because there is a divine orchestration happening through us and for us. So, I would love any questions. If anybody, has any questions or thoughts or feelings about this or your own experience for sure. Um, and you can find more of this type of perspectives on my website, Art of Sacred Embodiment. And, in there, I work with that whole life wellness. This is part of that whole life wellness, as well as the feminine path. Most of my work is of the feminine path. We're viewing for the feminine lens that then incorporates the masculine in more of an alchemical dance that's in balance and harmony, and that self-love and self-intimacy is also something that is incorporated in all the work that I do. So those of you who are integrating the small or the big deep, I hope that this supports you and gives you a reflection that begins to help guide you with more ease and grace. So you can find me at lotuslindley.net on Facebook as well, and have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day, morning, evening, whatever it is for you. Blessings.